Istanbul, the vibrant and historic city in Turkey, is a unique metropolis that straddles two continents, Europe and Asia, separated by the Bosporus Strait. Its strategic location has made it a cultural and commercial crossroads for thousands of years. With a history stretching back to ancient times, Istanbul has been the capital of three great empires, the Roman, Byzantine, and Ottoman. The city is a breathtaking blend of ancient and modern. Visitors can explore the rich architectural heritage, such as the Hagia Sophia, a magnificent structure that has served as a cathedral, mosque, and now a museum, and the Blue Mosque, known for its stunning blue-tiled interior and impressive domes. The Topkapi Palace, once the residence of Ottoman sultans, offers a glimpse into the opulence of the empire. Istanbul's Grand Bazaar is a labyrinthine market brimming with shops selling everything from Turkish carpets and jewelry to spices and ceramics. Meanwhile, the Spice Bazaar captivates with its vivid colors and exotic aromas. The Bosporus waterfront is perfect for scenic boat tours, offering breathtaking views of the city's iconic skyline, dotted with minarets and domes. The city is also known for its culinary delights, from traditional Turkish kebabs and mess to freshly baked simit, a type of sesame-covered bread, and sweet treats like baklava and Turkish delight. Modern districts such as Beyoğlu and Karaköy are filled with chic cafes, restaurants, and lively nightlife. Istanbul's streets are bustling and full of life, with a diverse mix of people reflecting the city's cosmopolitan character. Despite its modern developments, Istanbul retains a timeless allure, where East meets West in a harmonious blend of cultures, traditions, and history. Istanbul is the largest city in Turkey, straddling the Bosporus Strait, the boundary between Europe and Asia. It is considered the country's economic, cultural, and historic capital. The city has a population of over 15 million residents, comprising 19% of the population of Turkey, and is the most populous city in Europe and the world's 16th largest city. The city was founded as Byzantium in the 7th century BCE by Greek settlers from Megra. In 330 CE, the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great made it his imperial capital, renaming it first as New Rome and then finally as Constantinople, Constantinopolis, after himself. In 1930, the city's name was officially changed to Istanbul, the Turkish rendering of to the city, the appellation Greek speakers used since the 11th century to colloquially refer to the city. The city served as an imperial capital for almost 1600 years, during the Byzantine 1204, Latin 1204, 1261, Late Byzantine 1261, 1453, and Ottoman 1453, 1922 empires. The city grew in size and influence, eventually becoming a beacon of the Silk Road and one of the most important cities in history. The city played a key role in the advancement of Christianity during Roman-Byzantine times, hosting 4 of the first 7 ecumenical councils before its transformation to an Islamic stronghold following the fall of Constantinople in 1453 CE, especially after becoming the seat of the Ottoman Caliphate in 1517. In 1923, after the Turkish War of Independence, Ankara replaced the city as the capital of the newly formed Republic of Turkey. Istanbul was the 2010 European Capital of Culture. The city has surpassed London and Dubai to become the most visited city in the world, with more than 20 million foreign visitors in 2023. The historic center of Istanbul is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and the city hosts the headquarters of numerous Turkish companies, accounting for more than 30% of the country's economy. The first known name of the city is Byzantium, the name given to it at its foundation by Megarian colonists around 657 BC. Megarian colonists claimed a direct line back to the founders of the city, Byzas, the son of the god Poseidon and the nymph Seroessa. Modern excavations have raised the possibility that the name Byzantium might reflect the sites of native Thracian settlements that preceded the fully fledged town. Constantinople comes from the Latin name Constantinus, after Constantine the Great, the Roman emperor who refounded the city in 324 CE. Constantinople remained the most common name for the city in the West until the 1930s, when Turkish authorities began to press for the use of Istanbul in foreign languages. Osmanlı Ottoman Turkish and Istanbul were the names used alternatively by the Ottomans during their rule. The name Istanbul is commonly held to derive from the medieval Greek, literally to the city, and is how Constantinople was referred to by the local Greeks. This reflected its status as the only major city in the vicinity. The importance of Constantinople in the Ottoman world was also reflected by its nickname the Saadet Ottoman Turkish, meaning the gate to prosperity in Ottoman Turkish. An alternative view is that the name evolved directly from Constantinople, with the first and third syllables dropped. Some Ottoman sources of the 17th century, such as Evliya Çelebi, describe it as the common Turkish name of the time between the late 17th and late 18th centuries. It was also in official use. The first use of the word Istanbul Ottoman Turkish on coinage was in 1730 during the reign of Sultan Mahmud I. In modern Turkish, the name is written as Istanbul, with a dotted I, as the Turkish alphabet distinguishes between a dotted and dotless I. In English the stress is on the first or last syllable, but in Turkish it is on the second syllable. A person from the city is an Istanbullu. Istanbulite is used in English. Neolithic artifacts, uncovered by archaeologists at the beginning of the 21st century, indicate that Istanbul's historic peninsula was settled as far back as the 6th millennium BC. That early settlement, important in the spread of the Neolithic revolution from the Near East to Europe, lasted for almost a millennium before being inundated by rising water levels. The first human settlement on the Asian side, the Fikirtepe Mound, is from the Copper Age period, with artifacts dating from 5500 to 3500 BCE. On the European side, near the point of the peninsula Sarayburnu, there was a Thracian settlement during the early 1st millennium BC. Modern authors have linked it to the Thracian toponym Lygos, mentioned by Pliny the Elder as an earlier name for the site of Byzantium. The history of the city proper begins around 660 BCE, when Greek settlers from Megra established Byzantium on the European side of the Bosporus. The settlers built an acropolis adjacent to the Golden Horn on the site of the early Thracian settlements, fueling the nascent city's economy. The city experienced a brief period of Persian rule at the turn of the 5th century BCE, but the Greeks recaptured it during the Greco-Persian Wars. Byzantium then continued as part of the Athenian League and its successor, the Second Athenian League, before gaining independence in 355 BC. Long allied with the Romans, Byzantium officially became a part of the Roman Empire in 1973 CE. Byzantium's decision to side with the Roman usurper Pescennius Niger against Emperor Septimius Severus cost it dearly. By the time it surrendered at the end of 195 CE, 2 years of siege had left the city devastated. 5 years later, Severus began to rebuild Byzantium, and the city regained, and by some accounts, surpassed, its previous prosperity. Constantine the Great effectively became the emperor of the whole of the Roman Empire in September 324. 2 months later, he laid out the plans for a new, Christian city to replace Byzantium. As the eastern capital of the empire, the city was named Nova Roma, most called it Constantinople, a name that persisted into the 20th century. On 11th May 330, Constantinople was proclaimed the capital of the Roman Empire, which was later permanently divided between the two sons of Theodosius I upon his death on 17th January 395, when the city became the capital of the empire. During the following millennium of Roman history, the state is commonly referred to as the Byzantine Empire. The establishment of Constantinople was one of Constantine's most lasting accomplishments, shifting Roman power eastward as the city became a center of Greek culture and Christianity. Numerous churches were built across the city, including Hagia Sophia, which was built during the reign of Justinian I and remained the world's largest cathedral for 1,000 years. Constantine also undertook a major renovation and expansion of the Hippodrome of Constantinople, accommodating tens of thousands of spectators. The Hippodrome became central to civic life and, in the 5th and 6th centuries, the center of episodes of unrest, including the Nika riots. Constantinople's location also ensured its existence would stand the test of time. For many centuries, its walls and seafront protected Europe against invaders from the east and the advance of Islam. During most of the Middle Ages, the latter part of the Byzantine era, Constantinople was the largest and wealthiest city on the European continent and at times the largest in the world. Constantinople is generally considered to be the center and the cradle of Orthodox Christian civilization. Constantinople began to decline continuously after the end of the reign of Basil II in 1025. The Fourth Crusade was diverted from its purpose in 1204, and the city was sacked and pillaged by the Crusaders. They established the Latin Empire in place of the Orthodox Byzantine Empire. Hagia Sophia was converted to a Catholic church in 1204. The Byzantine Empire was restored, albeit weakened, in 1261. Constantinople's churches, defenses, and basic services were in disrepair, and its population had dwindled to 100,000 from 500,000 during the 8th century. After the reconquest of 1261, however, some of the city's monuments were restored, and some, like the two Thesis mosaics in Hagia Sophia and Karaköy, were created. Various economic and military policies instituted by Andronikos to Palaiologos, such as the reduction of military forces, weakened the empire and left it vulnerable to attack. In the mid-14th century, the Ottoman Turks began a strategy of gradually taking smaller towns and cities, cutting off Constantinople's supply routes and strangling it slowly. On 29 May 1453, after an 8-week siege during which the last Roman emperor, Constantine XI, was killed, Sultan Mehmed II the Conqueror captured Constantinople. Sultan Mehmed declared Constantinople the new capital of the Ottoman Empire. Hours after the fall of the city, the Sultan rode to the Hagia Sophia and summoned an imam to proclaim the Shahada, converting the Grand Cathedral into an imperial mosque due to the city's refusal to surrender peacefully. Mehmed declared himself as the new Kaisar-i-Rum, the Ottoman Turkish equivalent of the Caesar of Rome, and the Ottoman state was reorganized into an empire. Following the capture of Constantinople, Mehmed II immediately set out to revitalize the city. Cognizant that revitalization would fail without the repopulation of the city, Mehmed II welcomed everyone, foreigners, criminals, and runaways, showing extraordinary openness and willingness to incorporate outsiders that came to define Ottoman political culture. He also invited people from all over Europe to his capital, creating a cosmopolitan society that persisted through much of the Ottoman period. Revitalizing Istanbul also required a massive program of restorations of everything from roads to aqueducts. Like many monarchs before and since, Mehmed II transformed Istanbul's urban landscape with wholesale redevelopment of the city center. There was a huge new palace to rival, if not overshadow, the old one, a new covered market still standing as the Grand Bazaar, porticos, pavilions, walkways, as well as more than a dozen new mosques. Mehmed II turned the ramshackle old town into something that looked like an imperial capital. Social hierarchy was ignored by the rampant plague, which killed the rich and the poor alike in the 16th century. Money could not protect the rich from all the discomforts and harsher sides of Istanbul. Although the Sultan lived at a safe remove from the masses, and the wealthy and poor tended to live side by side, for the most part Istanbul was not zoned as modern cities are. Opulent houses shared the same streets and districts with tiny hovels. Those rich enough to have secluded country properties had a chance of escaping the periodic epidemics of sickness that blighted Istanbul. The Ottoman dynasty claimed the status of caliphate in 1517, with Constantinople remaining the capital of this last caliphate for 4 centuries. Suleiman the Magnificent's reign from 1520 to 1566 was a period of especially great artistic and architectural achievement. Chief architect Mimar Sinan designed several iconic buildings in the city, while Ottoman arts of ceramics, stained glass, calligraphy, and miniature flourished. The population of Constantinople was 570,000 by the end of the 18th century. A period of rebellion at the start of the 19th century led to the rise of the progressive Sultan Mahmud II and eventually to the Tanzimat period, which produced political reforms and allowed new technology to be introduced to the city. Bridges across the Golden Horn were constructed during this period, and Constantinople was connected to the rest of the European railway network in the 1880s. Modern facilities, such as a water supply network, electricity, telephones, and trams, were gradually introduced to Constantinople over the following decades, although later than to other European cities. The modernization efforts were not enough to forestall the decline of the Ottoman Empire. With the Young Turk Revolution in 1908, the Ottoman Parliament, closed since 14 February 1878, was reopened 30 years later on 23 July 1908, which marked the beginning of the Second Constitutional Era. The civil strife and political uncertainties in the Ottoman Empire during the months after the revolution encouraged Austria-Hungary to annex Bosnia and Bulgaria to declare its independence in a jointly coordinated move on 5 October 1908. Sultan Abdulhamid II was deposed in 1909, following the counter-revolution attempt known as the 31st March incident. A series of wars in the early 20th century, such as the Italo-Turkish War and the Balkan Wars, plagued the ailing empire's capital and resulted in the 1913 Ottoman coup d'etat, which brought the regime of the three Pashas. The Ottoman Empire joined World War I on the side of the Central Powers and was ultimately defeated. The deportation of Armenian intellectuals on 24 April 1915 was among the major events which marked the start of the Armenian genocide during WWI. Due to Ottoman and Turkish policies of Turkification and ethnic cleansing, the city's Christian population declined from 450,000 to 240,000 between 1914 and 1927. The Armistice of Mudros was signed on 30th October 1918 and the Allies occupied Constantinople on 13th November 1918. The Ottoman Parliament was dissolved by the Allies on 11th April 1920 and the Ottoman delegation led by Damat Ferit Pasha was forced to sign the Treaty of Sevres on 10th August 1920. Following the Turkish War of Independence 1919-1922, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey in Ankara abolished the Sultanate on 1st November 1922, and the last Ottoman Sultan, Mehmed VI, was declared persona non grata. Leaving aboard the British warship HMS Malaya on 17 November 1922, he went into exile and died in Sanremo, Italy, on 16 May 1926. The Treaty of Lausanne was signed on 24 July 1923, and the occupation of Constantinople ended with the departure of the last forces of the Allies from the city on 4 October 1923. Turkish forces of the Ankara government, commanded by Sukrun Ali Pasha, entered the city with a ceremony on 6 October 1923, which has been marked as the Liberation Day of Istanbul, and has been commemorated annually since. On 29 October 1923, the Grand National Assembly of Turkey declared the establishment of the Turkish Republic, with Ankara as its capital. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk became the republic's first president. In 1942, wealth tax assessed mainly on non-Muslims led to the transfer or liquidation of many businesses owned by religious minorities. The state-sanctioned 1955 Istanbul pogrom, in which hundreds of Greek men, women and children were attacked and raped and dozens murdered, led to the emigration of most of the remaining Greeks in Istanbul. Government persecution of Greeks and religious minorities, especially Christians, intensified through the 1960s as part of the process of Turkification. Further mass expulsions of Greeks took place in 1964 to 1965. As a result of these policies, the Greek population of Istanbul decreased from 110,000 in 1919 to 2,500 today. From the late 1940s and early 1950s, Istanbul underwent great structural change as new public squares, boulevards, and avenues were constructed throughout the city, sometimes at the expense of historical buildings. The overall population of Istanbul began to rapidly increase in the 1970s as people from Anatolia migrated to the city to find employment in the many new factories that were built on the outskirts of the sprawling metropolis. This sudden, sharp rise in the city's population caused a large demand for housing, and many previously outlying villages and forests became engulfed into the metropolitan area of Istanbul as a result of urban sprawl. Istanbul is in northwestern Turkey and straddles the Bosporus Strait, which provides the only passage from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean via the Sea of Marmara. Historically, the city has been ideally situated for trade and defense. The confluence of the Sea of Marmara, the Bosporus, and the Golden Horn provide both ideal defense against enemy attack and a natural tollgate. Several picturesque islands, Buyukda, Tebeliada, Burgazda, Nalada, and 5 smaller islands, are part of the city. Istanbul's shoreline has grown beyond its natural limits. Large sections of Cadabostan sit on areas of landfill, increasing the total area of the city to 5,343 square kilometers, 2,063 sq mi. Despite the myth that 7 hills make up the city, there are, in fact, more than 50 hills within the city limits. Istanbul's tallest hill, Ados, is 537 meters 1,762 feet high. The North Anatolian Fault, under the Sea of Marmara, is locked just south of the city. This fault caused the earthquakes in 1766 and 1894, and a quake of at least magnitude 7.0 is very likely in the 21st century, though an earthquake with a magnitude above 7.5 is thought to be impossible. Istanbul Municipality's Directorate of Earthquake and Ground Research is responsible for analyzing the methods to reduce the urban seismic risk, whereas the National Government-Controlled Disaster and Emergency Management Presidency is responsible for earthquake emergency response and will be helped by NGOs such as HH. The threat of major earthquakes plays a large role in the city's infrastructure development, with over 500,000 vulnerable buildings demolished and replaced since 2012. According to ministry statements and geologist comments made in 2023, the city's infrastructure was in reasonably good shape. However, due to very high costs, buildings were not, over 500,000 flats were still vulnerable to collapse, and casualties largely depend on how many collapse. As of 2024, most buildings in Istanbul were built to a low seismic standard in the 20th century, and residents think the city is not properly prepared for the earthquake. Istanbul's climate is temperate and is often described as transitional between the Mediterranean climate typical of the western and southern coasts of Turkey and the oceanic climate of the northwestern coasts of the country. Much divergence exists in the terminology used to classify the city's climate, however. The city's summers are warm to hot and moderately dry, with an average daytime temperature of about 28 degrees Celsius (82 degrees Fahrenheit) and less than 7 days of precipitation per month. Despite the generally acceptable temperature range, midsummer in Istanbul is considered moderately uncomfortable due to high dew points and relative humidity. Winters, meanwhile, are cool, quite rainy, and relatively snow-rich for a city with above freezing average temperatures. Istanbul's precipitation is unevenly distributed, with winter months getting at least twice the level of precipitation of their summerly counterparts. The mode of precipitation also varies by season. Winter precipitation is generally light, persistent, and often of mixed precipitation such as rain-snow mixes and graupel, while summer precipitation is generally abrupt and sporadic. Cloudiness, as with precipitation, varies greatly by season. Winters are quite cloudy, with around 20% of days being sunny or partly cloudy. Meanwhile, summers experience 60 to 70% of possible sunshine. Snowfall is sporadic, but accumulates virtually every winter, and when it does, it is highly disruptive to city infrastructure. Sea-effect snowstorms with more than 30 centimeters, 1 foot of snowfall happen almost annually, most recently in 2022. The Fatih district, which was named after Mehmed to Turkish, Fatih Sultan Mehmed, corresponds to what was the whole of Constantinople until the Ottoman conquest. Today it is the capital district and called the historic peninsula of Istanbul on the southern shore of the Golden Horn. Across the medieval Genoese citadel of Galata on the northern shore. The Genoese fortifications in Galata were largely demolished in the 19th century, leaving only the Galata Tower to make way for the northward expansion of the city. Galata is today a quarter within the Beyoğlu district, which forms Istanbul's commercial and entertainment center and includes Istiklal Avenue and Taksim Square. Dolmabahce Palace, the seat of government during the late Ottoman period, is in the Besiktas district on the European shore of the Bosporus, to the north of Beyoğlu. The former village of Ortaköy is within Besiktas and gives its name to the Ortaköy Mosque on the Bosporus, near the Bosporus Bridge. Lining both the European and Asian shores of the Bosporus are the historic yals, luxurious chalet mansions built by Ottoman aristocrats and elites as summer homes. Inland, north of Taksim Square is the Istanbul Central Business District, a set of corridors lined with office buildings, residential towers, shopping centers, and university campuses, and over 2 million meters 22 million square feet of Class A office space in total. Maslak, Levant, and Bomonti are important nodes within the CBD. The Ataturk Airport Corridor is another such edge city-style business, residential and shopping corridor with over 900,000 meters 9,700,000 square feet of Class A office space. Istanbul is primarily known for its Byzantine and Ottoman architecture. Despite its development as a Turkish city since 1923, it contains many ancient, Roman, Byzantine, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish monuments. The Neolithic settlement in the Yenikap quarter on the European side, which dates back to circa 6500 BC and predates the formation of the Bosporus by approximately a millennium, when the Sea of Marmara was still a lake, was discovered during the construction of the Marmara railway tunnel. It is the oldest known human settlement on the European side of the city. The oldest known human settlement on the Asian side is the Fikirtepe Mound near Karaköy, with relics dating to the Chalcolithic period circa 5500, circa 3500 BC. There are numerous ancient monuments in the city. The most ancient is the obelisk of Thutmose III. Built of red granite, 31 meters 100 feet high, it came from the temple of Karnak in Luxor and was erected there by Pharaoh Thutmose III to the south of the 7th pylon. The Roman Emperor Constantius to 361 CE had it, and another obelisk transported along the Nile to Alexandria for commemorating his Ventenalia or 20 years on the throne in 357. The other obelisk was erected on the Spina of the Circus Maximus in Rome in the autumn of that year, and is now known as the Lateran obelisk. The obelisk that would become the obelisk of Theodosius remained in Alexandria until 390, when Theodosius I 395 had it transported to Constantinople and put up on the Spina of the Hippodrome there. When re-erected at the Hippodrome of Constantinople, the obelisk was mounted on a decorative base, with reliefs that depict Theodosius I and his courtiers. The lower part of the obelisk was damaged in antiquity, probably during its transport to Alexandria in 357 CE or during its re-erection at the Hippodrome of Constantinople in 390 CE. As a result, the current height of the obelisk is only 18.54 meters, or 25.6 meters if the base is included. Between the four corners of the obelisk and the pedestal are four bronze cubes, used in its transportation and re-erection. Next in age is the serpent column, from 479 BC. It was brought from Delphi in 324 CE, during the reign of Constantine the Great, and also erected at the Spina of the Hippodrome. It was originally part of an ancient Greek sacrificial tripod in Delphi that was erected to commemorate the Greeks who fought and defeated the Persian Empire at the Battle of Plataea in 479 BC. The three serpent heads of the 8-meter 26 feet high column remained intact until the end of the 17th century. One is on display at the nearby Istanbul Archaeology Museums. Built in porphyry and erected at the center of the Forum of Constantine in 330 CE to mark the founding of the new Roman capital, the column of Constantine was originally adorned with a sculpture of the Roman Emperor Constantine the Great depicted as the solar god Apollo on its top, which fell in 1106 and was later replaced by a cross during the reign of Byzantine Emperor Manuel Komnenos 1143-1180. There are traces of the Byzantine era throughout the city, from ancient churches that were built over early Christian meeting places like the Hagia Irene, the Chora Church, the Monastery of Staudios, the Church of Sts. Sergius and Bacchus, the Church of Theotokos Pamakaristos, the Monastery of the Pantocrator, the Monastery of Christ Pantipox, the Hagia Theodosia, the Church of Theotokos Kyriotissa, the Monastery of Constantine Lips, the Church of Myrlin, the Hagios Theodoros, etc. Two palaces like the Great Palace of Constantinople and its Mosaic Museum, the Palace of the Porphyrogenitus, Bucolian Palace and Palace of Blachernay, and other public places and buildings like the Hippodrome, the Augustine, the Basilica Cistern, Theodosius Cistern, Cistern of Philoxenos and Cistern of the Hebdomon, the Aqueduct of Valence, the Prison of Animas, the Walls of Constantinople and the Porta Aurea Golden Gate, among numerous others. The 4th century harbour of Theodosius in Yenikap, once the busiest port in Constantinople, was among the numerous archaeological discoveries that took place during the excavations of the Marmara Tunnel. However, it is the Hagia Sophia that fully conveys the period of Constantinople as a city without parallel in Christendom. The Hagia Sophia, topped by a dome 31 meters, 2 feet in diameter over a square space defined by 4 arches, is the pinnacle of Byzantine architecture. The Hagia Sophia stood as the world's largest cathedral in the world until it was converted into a mosque in the 15th century. The minarets date from that period. Because of its historical significance, it was reopened as a museum in 1935. However, it was reconverted into a mosque in July 2020. Over the next 4 centuries, the Ottomans transformed Istanbul's urban landscape with a vast building scheme that included the construction of towering mosques and ornate palaces. The Sultanahmet Mosque, another landmark of the city, faces the Hagia Sophia at Sultanahmet Square Hippodrome of Constantinople. The Süleymaniye Mosque, built by Suleiman the Magnificent, was designed by his chief architect Mimar Sinan, the most illustrious of all Ottoman architects, who designed many of the city's renowned mosques and other types of public buildings and monuments. Among the oldest surviving examples of Ottoman architecture in Istanbul are the Anadoluhisar and Rumelihisar fortresses, which assisted the Ottomans during their siege of the city. Over the next 4 centuries, the Ottomans made an indelible impression on the skyline of Istanbul, building towering mosques and ornate palaces. Topkapi Palace, dating back to 1465, is the oldest seat of government surviving in Istanbul. Mehmed II built the original palace as his main residence and the seat of government. The present palace grew over the centuries as a series of additions enfolding 4 courtyards and blending neoclassical, Rococo, and Baroque architectural forms. In 1639, Murad IV made some of the most lavish additions, including the Baghdad kiosk, to commemorate his conquest of Baghdad the previous year. Government meetings took place here until 1786, when the seat of government was moved to the Sublime Porte. After several hundred years of royal residence, it was abandoned in 1853 in favor of the Baroque Dolmabahce Palace. Topkapi Palace became public property following the abolition of monarchy in 1922. After extensive renovation, it became one of Turkey's first national museums in 1924. The imperial mosques include Fatih Mosque, Bayezid Mosque, Yavuz Selim Mosque, Süleymaniye Mosque, Sultanahmet Mosque, the Blue Mosque, and Yani Mosque, all of which were built at the peak of the Ottoman Empire in the 16th and 17th centuries. In the following centuries, and especially after the Tanzimat reforms, Ottoman architecture was supplanted by European styles. An example of which is the Imperial Nur Osmaniye Mosque. Areas around Istiklal Avenue were filled with grand European embassies and rows of buildings in neoclassical, Renaissance Revival and Art Nouveau styles, which went on to influence the architecture of a variety of structures in Beyoğlu, including churches, stores, and theatres, and official buildings such as Dolmabahce Palace. Istanbul had the 11th largest economy among the world's urban areas in 2018 and is responsible for 30% of Turkey's industrial output, 31% of GDP, and 47% of tax revenues. The city's gross domestic product adjusted by stood at $537, 507 billion in 2018, with manufacturing and services accounting for 36% and 60% of the economic output respectively. Istanbul's productivity is 110% higher than the national average. Trade is economically important, accounting for 30% of the economic output in the city. In 2019, companies based in Istanbul produced exports worth $83.66 billion and received imports totaling $128.34 billion. These figures were equivalent to 47% and 61%, respectively, of the national totals. Istanbul, which straddles the Bosporus Strait, houses international ports that link Europe and Asia. The Bosporus, providing the only passage from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, is the world's busiest and narrowest strait used for international navigation, with more than 200 million tons of oil passing through it each year. International conventions guarantee passage between the Black and the Mediterranean seas, even when tankers carry oil, natural gas, chemicals, and other flammable or explosive materials as cargo. In 2011, as a workaround solution, the then Prime Minister Erdogan presented Canal Istanbul, a project to open a new strait between the Black and Marmara Seas. While the project was still on Turkey's agenda in 2020, there has not been a clear date set for it. Shipping is a significant part of the city's economy, with 73.9% of exports and 92.7% of imports in 2018 executed by sea. Istanbul has 3 major shipping ports, the port of Haydarpasa, the port of Ambal, and the port of Zeytinburnu, as well as several smaller ports and oil terminals along the Bosporus and the Sea of Marmara. Haydarpasa, at the southeastern end of the Bosporus, was Istanbul's largest port until the early 2000s. Since then, operations were shifted to Ambal, with plans to convert Haydarpasa into a tourism complex. In 2019, Ambal, on the western edge of the urban center, had an annual capacity of 3,104,882 TEUs, making it the third largest cargo terminal in the Mediterranean basin. Istanbul has been an international banking hub since the 1980s and is home to the only active stock exchange in Turkey, Borsa Istanbul, which was originally established as the Ottoman Stock Exchange in 1866. In 1995, keeping up with the financial trends, Borsa Istanbul moved its headquarters, which was originally located on Bankalar Caddesi, the financial center of the Ottoman Empire, and later at the 4th Vakfha building in Sarkesi to Istinai, in the vicinity of Maslak, which hosts the headquarters of numerous Turkish banks. Since 2023, the Atsehir district on the Asian side of the city is home to the Istanbul Financial Center, where the new headquarters of the state-owned Turkish banks, including the Turkish Central Bank, are located. As of 2023, the 5 tallest skyscrapers in Istanbul and Turkey are the 352 meters 1,154 feet 10 in tall Turkish Central Bank Tower in the Atsehir district on the Asian side of the city, Metropole Istanbul Tower A70 floors 301 meters including its twin spires also in the Atsehir district. Skyland Istanbul Towers 1 and 2 times 284 meters located adjacent to Nef Stadium in the Huzur neighborhood of the Sarıyer district on the European side, and Istanbul Sapphire 54 floors 238 meters, 261 meters including its spire in Levant on the European side. 13.4 million foreign tourists visited the city in 2018, making Istanbul the world's 5th most visited city in that year. Istanbul and Antalya are Turkey's 2 largest international gateways, receiving a quarter of the nation's foreign tourists. Istanbul has more than 50 museums, with the Topkapi Palace, the most visited museum in the city, bringing in more than $30 million in revenue each year. Istanbul expects 1 million tourists from cruise companies after the renovation of its cruise port, also known as Galata Port in Karaköy district.